Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defender and watched the stars through the main window. His ship was one of humanity's newest patrol vessels, built for deep space operations far from Earth. The Defender had been traveling through the Kepler 4H42 system for 3 weeks now, checking on the automated beacons that marked human territory. Jake had been a ship captain for 12 years, but he still felt amazed when he looked at the boundary markers floating in space. Each beacon was the size of a small building and broadcast the same message in 17 different alien languages. The message was simple and clear. It told anyone who found it that this area belonged to humans and that peaceful ships could pass through if they asked permission first. Military ships that entered without permission would face consequences. The beacons formed a sphere around 12 star systems that Earth had claimed as human space. Inside this sphere, human colonies were growing on 6 different planets. Mining ships collected resources from asteroid belts. Research stations studied everything they could find. It was not much compared to the vast galaxy, but it was theirs. Jake's communications officer, Lieutenant Amy Foster, looked up from her station with a worried expression on her face. She had been monitoring long-range sensors all morning, and something was bothering her. Amy had served under Jake for 4 years, and he trusted her judgment completely. "Captain, I'm picking up some unusual readings from the outer boundary," Amy said. "Multiple ships crossing the marker line without sending any identification signals." Jake walked over to her station and looked at the sensor display. The screen showed several red dots moving through human space. Each dot represented a ship that was much larger than anything humans had built. The ships were not trying to hide their presence, but they were also not responding to the standard communication requests that the boundary beacons automatically sent to all vessels. "How many ships are we talking about?" Jake asked. Amy checked her instruments again. "At least 20 so far, sir. They're moving in formation and heading deeper into our territory. The computer identifies them as Zephyrian Empire vessels based on their energy signatures." Jake felt his stomach tighten. Everyone in human space knew about the Zephyrian Empire. They controlled dozens of star systems across the galaxy and had a reputation for taking whatever they wanted. Their military was enormous and their technology was more advanced than anything humans possessed. If the Zephyrians were entering human space with warships, it could only mean trouble. "Get me Admiral Lisa Carter at Luna Station," Jake ordered. "Priority channel." The main screen flickered and showed the face of Admiral Carter. She was sitting in her command center on Luna Station, which orbited Earth's moon. Behind her, Jake could see dozens of officers working at control stations. The Admiral looked tired, as if she had not slept much recently. "Captain Morrison," Admiral Carter said, "I've been expecting your call. We've been tracking the Zephyrian ships for the past 6 hours. They crossed into our territory near the Alpha Centauri boundary, and they're heading straight for the inner systems." "Have we tried to contact them?" Jake asked. "Commander Ben Davis attempted communication from his diplomatic vessel 3 hours ago," the Admiral replied. The response was not encouraging. The Zephyrian fleet commander identified himself as Admiral Crickster. "He basically told us that the Zephyrian Empire goes wherever it pleases, and that our territorial boundaries mean nothing to them." Jake had heard of Admiral Crickstar before. The alien commander was famous throughout the galaxy for his conquest of 17 different worlds. He was known for using overwhelming force to crush any resistance quickly and completely. If Crickstar was leading this fleet, then the Zephyrians were serious about whatever they planned to do in human space. "What are our orders, Admiral?" Jake asked. Admiral Carter was quiet for a moment. "Continue your patrol, Captain. Monitor the Zephyrian fleet, but do not engage unless they attack first. I'm recalling all available ships to defensive positions around our key systems. President Kate Williams has called an emergency session of the United Earth Council." The transmission ended, and Jake stared at the blank screen. He had served in the Earth Defense Force since humans first started traveling between star systems. But this was the first time they faced a threat from one of the galaxy's major powers. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 47 different worlds. They commanded over 3,000 warships. Human space had maybe 200 ships total, and most of those were cargo vessels or research ships with minimal weapons. Amy looked up from her sensor station again. Captain, I'm detecting more ships entering our territory. The count is up to 50 Zephyrian vessels now, and they're all military configuration. Jake walked back to his command chair and sat down heavily. He activated the ship's internal communication system to address his crew. All hands, this is the captain. As you may have noticed, we have uninvited guests in human space. A Zephyrian Empire fleet has crossed our territorial boundary without permission and without responding to our communication attempts. We are to continue our mission and observe their movements while avoiding direct confrontation unless attacked. First, in her laboratory on Earth, Dr. Helen Ross was working frantically on humanity's newest defense systems. She had been the chief of human defense research for 8 years, ever since Earth established its first colonies beyond the solar system. Helen had always believed that humans would eventually face threats from more advanced alien civilizations, and she had spent her career preparing for that day. The research facility was located deep in the Colorado mountains, protected by layers of security and secrecy. Helen's team had been developing new technologies based on a simple principle. Humans could not match the raw power of species like the Zephyrians, but they could be smarter and more creative in how they used what they had. Helen received updates about the Zephyrian fleet every hour from Admiral Carter's headquarters. Each report made the situation sound worse. The alien ships were not just passing through human space. They were taking positions that would allow them to control key shipping routes and communication networks. This looked like the beginning of an invasion. Director of Defense Operations Greg Martinez arrived at the research facility that evening with a team of military advisors. Greg had been coordinating Earth's defense planning since the territorial boundaries were first established. He was a practical man who understood that humanity's survival might depend on the technologies that Helen's team was developing. How much time do you need? Greg asked Helen as they walked through the laboratory. That depends on what the Zephyrians are planning, Helen replied. If they're just trying to intimidate us, we have maybe a few weeks to finish the current projects. If they're planning to attack immediately, then we need to use what we have ready right now. Greg looked at the various devices and computer systems that filled Helen's laboratory. Most of the equipment was experimental and had never been tested in real combat situations. What exactly do we have ready right now? Helen smiled for the first time that day. We have some surprises that I think will make Admiral Crickstar very uncomfortable. The question is whether we'll get the chance to use them before his fleet decides to start shooting. Far above Earth's atmosphere, Admiral Carter stood in the command center of Luna Station and watched the tactical displays that showed Zephyrian ship movements. She had commanded the Sol Defense Fleet for 6 years, but she had never faced a situation like this one. The alien fleet was clearly positioning itself for either a major attack or a complete occupation of human space. Carter's staff had calculated that the Zephyrian ships could destroy every human military vessel in direct combat within a matter of hours. The only hope was that President Williams and the Earth Council could find a diplomatic solution before the shooting started. Unfortunately, Admiral Crickstar did not seem interested in negotiations. The Admiral opened a communication channel to all human ships and colonies in the threatened systems. This is Admiral Carter speaking from Sol Defense Command. As you know, a Zephyrian Empire fleet has entered human territory without authorization. All civilian vessels should move to safe positions near our defended installations. All military vessels should prepare for possible combat operations. We do not know what the Zephyrians intend, but we will be ready for whatever comes next. As night fell on Earth, the emergency session of the United Earth Council continued in Geneva. President Williams and representatives from every human colony debated their response to the Zephyrian threat. Some council members wanted to surrender immediately to avoid bloodshed. Others demanded that humanity fight regardless of the odds. President Williams knew that the decision she made in the next few hours would determine the future of human civilization in space. Meanwhile, Admiral Crickstar's fleet continued its advance toward the heart of human space, treating Earth's territorial boundaries as nothing more than suggestions that could be ignored without consequence. Admiral Crickstar stood in the command center of his flagship and felt satisfied with how the operation was proceeding. The Zephyrian battle fleet consisted of 200 of the Empire's most advanced warships, each one capable of destroying multiple human vessels without difficulty. The humans had drawn their little boundary lines around 12 star systems and expected the galaxy to respect their territorial claims, but the Zephyrian Empire respected only strength. Krixtar had conquered 17 worlds using the same basic strategy. Overwhelming force applied without hesitation or mercy. Most species surrendered immediately when they saw the size of his fleet. Those that chose to fight were crushed so quickly and completely that other nearby civilizations learned to submit, without resistance. The humans would follow the same pattern as all the others. The Admiral's tactical officer, Commander Vexhai, reported that the human ships in the area were maintaining their distance and making no aggressive moves. This was exactly what Krixtar expected. The humans had maybe 40 military vessels scattered across their claimed territory, while his fleet alone contained 200 ships specifically designed for conquest and occupation. Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster sat at her monitoring station on Titan Research Station and tracked every movement of the Zephyrian fleet. The alien ships were advancing in a standard Imperial formation that she recognized from military databases. They were not trying to hide their intentions or their capabilities. This was meant to be a demonstration of power that would convince humanity to surrender without a fight. Amy had been studying alien military tactics for 6 years as part of her duties with the Sol Defense Intelligence Division. The Zephyrians always used the same approach because it worked so well. Their ships were larger, faster, and better armed than anything their enemies possessed. They could afford to be direct and obvious because no one could match them in conventional space combat. The research station's long-range sensors were among the most advanced that humans had built, and Amy was using them to gather detailed information about each Zephyrian vessel. The data would be crucial if fighting actually started. She sent continuous updates to Admiral Carter at Luna Station and to Captain Jake Morrison aboard the Defender. Commander Pete Jackson led a squadron of Earth's fastest reconnaissance ships through the outer regions of the solar system. His 6 vessels were built for speed and stealth rather than combat, but they could gather intelligence that larger ships might miss. Pete had been shadowing the Zephyrian fleet for 18 hours, staying at maximum sensor range to avoid detection. The alien formation included heavy battle cruisers, fast attack vessels, troop transports, and support ships. Pete counted enough landing craft to occupy at least 3 Earth-sized planets simultaneously. This was not just a show of force or a diplomatic gesture. The Zephyrians were prepared for a full-scale invasion and conquest of human space. Pete's squadron transmitted encrypted reports back to Admiral Carter every 2 hours. The intelligence painted a picture of an enemy that was confident, well-prepared, and completely committed to whatever operation they were conducting. The Zephyrians were not planning to negotiate or compromise. They were planning to take whatever they wanted and destroy anything that stood in their way. Dr. Helen Ross worked through her 3rd consecutive night in the Colorado Research Facility. Her team had been testing and refining their defensive systems ever since the first Zephyrian ships crossed into human territory. The technologies they had developed were unlike anything that had been used in space combat before, but Helen was not sure they would be enough against such a large and powerful enemy fleet. Helen's approach to defense was based on a simple principle that human military leaders had learned through centuries of warfare on Earth. When facing a larger and stronger opponent, the key to survival was changing the rules of engagement. Instead of trying to match the enemy's strengths, you had to find ways to turn those strengths into weaknesses. The research team had spent 4 years developing systems that could exploit the tactical assumptions that species like the Zephyrians made about space combat. Most alien civilizations fought using massive ships with powerful weapons and heavy armor. They expected their enemies to do the same thing, which created opportunities for more creative approaches. Director Greg Martinez arrived at the facility with updated intelligence reports from the reconnaissance squadrons. The Zephyrian fleet was larger and more advanced than Earth's analysts had initially estimated. Greg looked tired and worried as he reviewed Helen's latest test results. "Are you confident these systems will work against real targets?" Greg asked. Helen looked at the experimental equipment that filled her laboratory. "We've tested everything extensively in simulation, but we've never had the chance to use any of it in actual combat. The Zephyrians are about to give us that opportunity whether we want it or not." Admiral Krickstar's fleet reached the inner boundary of human space and encountered their first surprise. The automated defense platforms that long-range scans had detected were not where they were supposed to be. Human ships had apparently been busy during the weeks of diplomatic posturing, relocating and upgrading their boundary defenses. The Admiral was not particularly concerned about human defensive installations. Zephyrian weapons could destroy any fixed fortification that humans might have constructed. However, he was annoyed that his intelligence reports had been inaccurate. The humans were apparently more active and organized than he had expected. Commander. HFY reported that the human ships in the area were broadcasting some kind of coded signals to each other. The Zephyrian fleet's communication specialists were trying to decode the transmissions, but human encryption methods were apparently more sophisticated than anticipated. Captain Morrison's Defender had indeed been busy during the diplomatic phase of the crisis. His crew had spent 2 weeks moving through the boundary systems and making modifications to the defensive installations that protected human space. The changes were subtle and would not be obvious to long-range sensors, but they would make a significant difference if fighting actually started. Jake had received detailed instructions from Dr. Ross's research team about how to prepare the boundary defenses for what she called Package Alpha. He did not fully understand all the technical details, but he trusted Helen's judgment about what would be needed to protect human territory against a superior enemy force. The Defender's crew worked with quiet efficiency as they prepared for whatever was coming next. Every human ship in the fleet had been modified over the past month with new systems and capabilities that most other species had never seen before. The modifications were based on Helen's principle that conventional space combat was a game that humans could not win, so they needed to find ways to play a different game entirely. Admiral Krickstar grew impatient with human resistance and opened a communication channel that broadcast to every ship and installation in the system. His message was intended to end any thoughts of resistance before they could develop into actual fighting. "I am Admiral Krickstar of the 47th Imperial Fleet of the Zephyrian Empire," he announced. "You will surrender all military vessels immediately and prepare your colonies for occupation assessment. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of your military forces and the sterilization of your inhabited worlds. You have 1 hour to comply." Admiral Carter received Krickstar's ultimatum at Luna Station and immediately opened her own communication channel. Her response was broadcast not only to human ships but also to neutral vessels from other species that were observing the situation. Carter wanted every government in the sector to hear what happened when someone crossed humanity's declared boundaries. "Admiral Krickstar," Carter replied, "you saw the line we drew in space. You crossed it without permission and without respect for our territorial sovereignty. You've threatened our people and demanded our surrender. Now you get to learn why humans don't make empty threats when we mark our boundaries." The Admiral's response puzzled Krickstar and his staff. Most species that faced Zephyrian ultimatums either surrendered immediately or made desperate pleas for mercy. The humans sounded almost eager for the fighting to begin, which made no tactical sense given the overwhelming disadvantage they faced. Commander HFY reported that human ships throughout the system were moving into new positions, but they were not forming any recognizable battle formations. Instead of concentrating their forces for maximum firepower, they seemed to be spreading out and taking positions that would make them easy targets for Zephyrian weapons. Captain Jenny Coleman commanded Earth Stealth Squadron from her ship, the Shadow. Her 6 vessels were equipped with the most advanced concealment systems that human technology could produce, but they were still primitive compared to what major alien civilizations possessed. However, Jenny's mission did not require her ships to remain hidden for very long. Each stealth ship carried thousands of small devices that looked like standard maintenance drones used for asteroid mining operations. The drones had been reprogrammed by Dr. Ross's team with new instructions, but they would appear harmless to enemy sensors until they were activated. The battle began when Admiral Krickstar ordered his flagship to destroy a human monitoring station that orbited a small moon in the outer system. The Zephyrian weapons fired with devastating accuracy, and the station disappeared in a brilliant flash of energy. Krickstar expected this demonstration of power to convince the remaining human forces to surrender immediately. Instead, Captain Morrison activated the first phase of humanity's response. The Defender did not engage the Zephyrian fleet in traditional, ship-to-ship combat. Morrison's crew had been preparing for this moment for weeks, and they were ready to deploy systems that no alien species had ever encountered in space warfare. Chief Engineer Tony Martinez worked at his control station aboard the Defender and began activating what Dr. Helen Ross had called Package Alpha. Tony had been skeptical when he first heard about Helen's unconventional approach to space combat, but he had learned to trust her creative solutions to impossible problems. The first surprise came from the asteroid belt that surrounded the Kepler 442 system. What appeared to be a natural collection of rocks and metal debris was actually a carefully constructed defensive network that human mining ships had spent months positioning throughout the region. Each asteroid was equipped with basic maneuvering, thrusters and proximity sensors that had been salvaged from decommissioned spacecraft. The rocks looked completely natural to enemy sensors, but they could be controlled remotely by human operators when needed. Lieutenant Sarah Blake triggered the cascade from her hidden control station. Thousands of asteroids began moving simultaneously, not toward the Zephyrian ships but into precisely calculated collision courses with each other. The resulting debris field created a navigation nightmare that forced the larger Imperial ships into predictable evasive patterns. Admiral Krikstar watched in confusion as his carefully planned formation began to break apart. His ships were designed for combat in open space, not for maneuvering through dense debris fields created by exploding asteroids. The human tactic was completely unexpected and highly effective at disrupting Zephyrian battle plans. Commander Vexhai reported that the asteroid explosions were not natural collisions, but coordinated attacks designed to channel the Imperial fleet into specific areas of space. The humans were apparently more organized and creative than Zephyrian intelligence had anticipated. Captain Jenny Coleman's stealth squadron used the chaos created by the asteroid field to deploy the second phase of humanity's defense strategy. Jenny's ships moved through the confusion without being detected by Zephyrian sensors, which were focused on avoiding collisions with debris. Each stealth ship released thousands of small maintenance drones that had originally been designed for asteroid mining operations. The drones were programmed with simple instructions that Dr. Ross had developed specifically for this situation. They were told to locate enemy spacecraft and begin standard maintenance procedures on any systems they could access. The maintenance drones were too small to be detected by Zephyrian weapons systems, and they looked like harmless space debris until they attached themselves to enemy ship hulls. Once attached, they began following their programming by attempting to optimize and repair everything they found. Admiral Krikstar's flagship began experiencing unexplained technical problems. Within minutes of the drone deployment, systems that had functioned perfectly for years suddenly required constant attention from engineering crews. Weapon targeting systems developed accuracy problems. Life support systems needed manual adjustments every few minutes. The problems spread throughout the Zephyrian fleet as more drones attached themselves to ship hulls and began their optimization work. The aliens did not immediately understand what was happening, because the drones looked like normal space debris, and their activities appeared to be random equipment failures. Commander Ben Davis monitored the engagement from his diplomatic vessel, which was positioned at a safe distance from the combat zone. Davis was recording everything that happened for transmission to the Galactic Council and other neutral observers throughout the sector. Ben's mission was crucial to humanity's long-term strategy. Earth's leaders wanted every species in the galaxy to witness what happened when someone crossed human territorial boundaries without permission. The recording would serve as both a diplomatic document and a warning to other potential aggressors. Captain Rick Thompson commanded humanity's newest experimental vessel, the Pathfinder, which had been specifically designed to test Dr. Ross's most advanced defensive concepts. Rick's ship was equipped with communication systems that could broadcast across all subspace frequencies used for interstellar navigation. Thompson began transmitting detailed technical specifications, tactical assessments, and strategic analysis of every Zephyrian ship in the fleet. The broadcast included information about weapons capabilities, shield frequencies, engine specifications, and crew complement for each Imperial vessel. Within hours, This technical intelligence reached every government, criminal organization, rebel group, and corporate entity within 50 light-years of the battle. The Pathfinder's transmissions turned Admiral Krickstar's overwhelming force into a public relations disaster for the Zephyrian Empire. Admiral Krickstar realized that his fleet's military capabilities were now known to every enemy the Empire had, made during decades of conquest. Rebel groups on occupied worlds would have detailed plans showing exactly how to exploit Zephyrian weaknesses. Pirates would know which ships to target for maximum profit with minimum risk. Commander Maria Santos led humanity's psychological warfare division from a converted cargo vessel that had been equipped with advanced communication equipment. Maria's team began broadcasting intercepted transmissions from Imperial worlds that revealed growing unrest among conquered populations. The broadcasts included recorded conversations between Zephyrian officials discussing the technical vulnerabilities that human intelligence gathering had exposed. Rebel leaders on dozens of worlds were already making plans to exploit the information that Thompson's ship had transmitted throughout the sector. Dr. Ross had designed the maintenance drones with one final capability that she had not explained to anyone except Admiral Carter. The small devices had not been sabotaging Zephyrian systems randomly. They had been installing tiny communication devices throughout each enemy ship while appearing to perform routine maintenance work. Every Imperial vessel in Admiral Krickstar's fleet was now serving as an unwitting relay station for human intelligence gathering operations. The Zephyrians were unknowingly transmitting their own tactical communications, strategic planning sessions, and operational orders directly to human monitoring stations. Captain Morrison coordinated the final demonstration of human tactical doctrine from the bridge of the Defender. His ship approached disabled Zephyrian vessels and used precision weapons to damage their engines and communication systems without harming the crews aboard. The disabled ships were left floating helplessly in space while broadcasting continuous distress signals on emergency frequencies. Every neutral observer in the region could see that the powerful Zephyrian fleet was calling for help and rescue assistance. Admiral Carter explained humanity's strategy to the increasingly desperate Admiral Krickstar during a communication exchange that was recorded and transmitted throughout the sector. "You expected us to fight your kind of war," Carter said. "Big ships, heavy weapons, winner takes all. But humans learned warfare from each other first, and we've been fighting asymmetrically for thousands of years." The Admiral continued her explanation, while Zephyrian technical crews struggled to deal with the ongoing effects of human defensive systems. "We don't just draw lines in space, Admiral. We make crossing them more expensive than you're willing to pay." Admiral Krickstar found himself commanding a fleet that was simultaneously compromised, exposed, sabotaged, and serving as an involuntary intelligence source for human forces. His ships were broadcasting distress signals that made the mighty Zephyrian Empire look weak and vulnerable to every potential enemy within communication range. The Imperial fleet's operational capability continued to deteriorate as the maintenance drones completed their optimization work throughout each ship's critical systems. What had appeared to be helpful repairs were actually subtle modifications that made the vessels dependent on constant human technical support. Commander Vexhai reported that 17 ships were now completely unable to function without continuous manual intervention from their crews. The remaining vessels were experiencing cascading system failures that would eventually leave them as helpless as the ships that had already been disabled. Lieutenant Amy Foster monitored the overall tactical situation from Titan Research Station and transmitted regular updates to Earth Command. The Zephyrian fleet was no longer capable of conducting offensive operations, but they were also unable to retreat from human space without assistance. Admiral Krickstar realized that his position was hopeless, but refusing to accept defeat. The Yar Admiral who had conquered 17 worlds was now trapped in enemy territory with a fleet that could barely function and no way to restore his ship's combat capabilities without human cooperation. Admiral Krickstar stared at the tactical displays in his command center and tried to understand how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. 3 days earlier, he had commanded the most powerful fleet in Zephyrian history. Now his ships were barely functional, his tactical advantages had been turned into weaknesses, and his fleet's technical specifications were being broadcast to every enemy of the Empire throughout the galaxy. The humans had done something that no species in Krikstar's experience had ever attempted. Instead of trying to match Zephyrian firepower with their own weapons, they had changed the fundamental nature of space combat itself. They had turned his fleet's strengths into vulnerabilities and made his overwhelming technological superiority work against him. Captain Morrison coordinated the ongoing operations from the bridge of the Defender. His crew monitored the status of every Zephyrian ship in the disabled fleet and continued to deploy maintenance drones whenever the aliens attempted to repair their damaged systems. Morrison felt no satisfaction in the enemy's predicament, but he was determined to ensure that the lesson was learned completely. The Defender's communication systems were now connected directly to the internal networks of every Imperial ship through the tiny relay devices that Dr. Ross's maintenance drones had installed. Morrison could listen to Zephyrian tactical discussions, strategic planning sessions, and damage control reports in real time. Chief Engineer Tony Martinez reported that the maintenance drones were performing exactly as Dr. Ross had designed them. Every attempt by Zephyrian repair crews to restore their ship's systems resulted in new optimization procedures that created additional dependencies on human technical support. Lieutenant Sarah Blake coordinated the intelligence gathering operation from her hidden control station. The information that human systems were collecting from inside the Zephyrian fleet was unprecedented in its detail and scope. Earth's military analysts would be studying this data for years to come. Commander Ben Davis continued recording everything that happened for transmission to the Galactic Council and other interested observers throughout the sector. The diplomatic implications of the Battle of Kepler 442 would affect human relationships with dozens of alien civilizations for decades into the future. Captain Rick Thompson maintained the Pathfinder's continuous broadcast of Zephyrian fleet, specifications to every communication network within 50 light-years. The technical intelligence was being analyzed by military organizations, intelligence services, rebel groups, and criminal enterprises across multiple star systems. Admiral Krikstar received reports from his intelligence officers about the growing chaos that Thompson's broadcasts were causing throughout Zephyrian territory. 17 different rebel movements had already begun planning operations based on the technical vulnerabilities that human intelligence had revealed. The planet Zephyr Prime, capital world of the Empire, was experiencing riots as news of the fleet's humiliation spread through subspace communication networks. The Imperial Senate was demanding explanations from military leaders about how a primitive human force had defeated the Empire's most advanced battle fleet. Commander Maria Santos expanded her psychological warfare operations to include direct communication with Zephyrian crew members aboard the disabled ships. Maria's team had learned enough about Imperial military protocols to impersonate Zephyrian command authorities and issue conflicting orders that created confusion throughout the enemy fleet. The psychological pressure on Zephyrian personnel was enormous. They were trapped in enemy territory with non-functional ships, surrounded by hostile forces, and receiving contradictory orders from sources they could not verify. Many crews were on the verge of mutiny against their officers. Dr. Helen Ross monitored the battle's progress from her laboratory and made real-time adjustments to the maintenance drone programming. The small devices were now performing increasingly sophisticated modifications to Zephyrian systems, making the alien ships completely dependent on human technical expertise for basic operations. Helen had designed the drones with learning capabilities that allowed them to adapt their optimization procedures based on how the Zephyrians attempted to counter their activities. Every repair effort by Imperial engineers resulted in more complex modifications that deepened the fleet's dependence on human cooperation. Director Greg Martinez coordinated with Earth's intelligence services to ensure that all information gathered during the battle was properly analyzed and disseminated. The technical specifications of Zephyrian military hardware would be invaluable for defending against future threats from the Empire or other hostile alien civilizations. Admiral Carter maintained communication with human ships throughout the engagement zone and provided tactical coordination when needed. The battle was proceeding better than anyone had expected, but Carter knew that the real challenge would come after the fighting ended. The Zephyrian Empire would not accept this humiliation quietly. Even if Admiral Krikstar's fleet was completely destroyed, The Empire still controlled dozens of worlds and commanded thousands of other warships. Earth needed to be prepared for possible retaliation on a much larger scale. Captain Jenny Coleman's stealth squadron continued operating throughout the debris fields, deploying additional maintenance drones and monitoring Zephyrian attempts to develop countermeasures against human tactics. Jenny's ships were also collecting physical samples of Imperial technology for analysis by Earth's research teams. The stealth ships had managed to retrieve intact components from several damaged Zephyrian vessels. These samples would allow human scientists to study Imperial technology in detail and develop more effective countermeasures for future encounters. Lieutenant Amy Foster reported from Titan Research Station that neutral observers from at least 12 different species were monitoring the battle and transmitting reports to their home governments. The engagement was becoming a galactic spectacle that would influence diplomatic relationships throughout the sector. Amy's analysis indicated that several major alien civilizations were reassessing their opinions about human military capabilities. Species that had previously considered Earth to be a minor power were now taking humanity seriously as a potential ally or threat. Admiral Crickstar opened a communication channel to Captain Morrison aboard the Defender. The Zephyrian commander's voice sounded tired and defeated as he attempted to negotiate some kind of resolution to the crisis. Captain Morrison, Crickstar, said, "Your tactics have been most effective, but this engagement cannot continue indefinitely. My ships are unable to function properly, and my crews are beginning to suffer from the stress of constant system failures. What do you require for the safe passage of my fleet from your territory?" Morrison's response was broadcast throughout the sector on all communication frequencies. "Admiral, you entered human space without permission and threatened our people with conquest and destruction. The safe passage of your fleet is not something we're prepared to negotiate at this time." The captain continued his response while monitoring reports from human ships throughout the combat zone. "However, we are willing to discuss the broader issues that led to this situation. Perhaps it's time for the Zephyrian Empire to reconsider its approach to territorial boundaries established by other species." Commander Vexahai reported to Admiral Crickster that several other Zephyrian fleets were moving toward human space, apparently planning to rescue the disabled ships. However, these relief forces were still several days away, and their approach was being monitored by human intelligence networks. The additional fleets would face the same tactical challenges that had defeated Crickstar's forces. Human defensive systems were not limited to the Kepler 442 system, and Dr. Ross's research teams had been preparing countermeasures for exactly this kind of escalation. President Williams convened an emergency session of the United Earth Council to discuss the implications of humanity's unexpected military success. The engagement had demonstrated that human defensive strategies could defeat superior alien forces, but it had also created new diplomatic challenges that needed to be addressed carefully. The president knew that other alien civilizations were watching the battle and drawing their own conclusions about human capabilities and intentions. Earth needed to send clear signals about its willingness to defend its territory, while avoiding actions that might be seen as aggressive or expansionist. Captain Thompson expanded the Pathfinder's intelligence broadcasts to include detailed analysis of Zephyrian military doctrine, command structures, and strategic planning methods. This information would be valuable to any species that faced potential threats from the Empire in the future. Thompson's broadcasts were also having effects that extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Intelligence services throughout the galaxy were using the information to reassess their understanding of Zephyrian capabilities and vulnerabilities. Dr. Ross received reports that the maintenance drones had begun adapting to Zephyrian countermeasures more quickly than she had expected. The artificial intelligence systems controlling the drones were learning from each interaction with Imperial technology and developing new optimization procedures in real time. President Kate Williams received Admiral Crickstar's surrender request in the Situation Room beneath Geneva and felt the weight of history settling on her shoulders. No human leader had ever been in a position to negotiate with a defeated galactic power, and the decisions she made in the next few hours would affect humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. Admiral Carter participated in the emergency conference from Luna Station, along with Director Martinez, Dr. Ross, and the senior diplomatic staff. The group had to balance several competing objectives while responding to the Zephyrian surrender offer. They needed to demonstrate human strength without appearing aggressive to other alien civilizations that were monitoring the situation. After 3 hours of discussion, President Williams made her decision. Earth would accept Admiral Crickstar's request for formal negotiations, but the talks would take place aboard Captain Morrison's ship, the Defender, with full diplomatic protocols and complete transparency for all galactic observers. Commander Ben Davis received instructions to serve as the primary human negotiator, supported by technical experts and military advisors. The negotiations would be recorded and broadcast throughout the sector, ensuring that every alien government understood exactly what had happened when the Zephyrian Empire crossed humanity's territorial boundaries. Captain Morrison prepared the Ito Defender to host the most important diplomatic meeting in human history. The ship's main conference room was equipped with translation systems that could handle Zephyrian languages and communication protocols. Security teams ensured that both human and alien delegations would be completely safe during the talks. Admiral Crickstar arrived aboard the Defender accompanied by Commander Vexhai and a small group of technical advisors. The Zephyrian admiral looked older and more tired than his official portrait suggested, but he maintained the dignity expected of an imperial commander even in defeat. The formal negotiations began with Admiral Crickstar making an admission that shocked both his own staff and the human delegation. In 47 successful conquests across the galaxy, we never encountered a species that turned our own strengths against us so thoroughly. Your territorial boundaries were not just markers in space. They were the outer edge of a carefully prepared trap. Commander Davis responded on behalf of Earth's government. Admiral, humanity has no interest in conquest or expansion beyond our declared territorial boundaries. However, we are absolutely committed to defending those boundaries against any threat, regardless of the size or technological advantages of hostile forces. Dr. Ross participated in the technical discussions that followed the initial diplomatic exchanges. She explained humanity's defensive philosophy to the Zephyrian delegation in terms that military professionals from any species could understand. We are not the strongest or the most advanced species in the galaxy, Dr. Ross said, but we might be the most adaptable. When we draw lines in space, we don't expect them to hold through superior firepower. We expect them to hold because crossing them becomes more trouble than it's worth. Admiral Crickstar asked detailed questions about the maintenance drones, the asteroid field modifications, and the intelligence broadcasting systems that had defeated his fleet so completely. He was clearly trying to understand how humans had developed such effective countermeasures against conventional space warfare tactics. Dr. Ross was careful to explain the principles behind human defensive systems without revealing specific technical details that might be used against Earth in the future. The goal was to demonstrate that humanity's territorial boundaries were defended by systematic thinking rather than just advanced technology. The negotiations continued for 18 hours, over 3 days with breaks for both delegations to consult with their governments. The talks were complicated by the fact that Admiral Crickstar was representing an empire that had never been forced to negotiate from a position of weakness. Captain Jenny Coleman's stealth squadron maintained security around the Defender during the negotiations, monitoring for any signs of Zephyrian reinforcements or rescue attempts. Jenny's ships also continued to deploy maintenance drones throughout the disabled fleet, ensuring that the aliens remained dependent on human cooperation. The final agreement became known as the Treaty of Kepler 442, and it established several important precedents in galactic law. The Zephyrian Empire formally recognized human territorial boundaries and agreed to respect Earth's sovereignty within the 12-system sphere that had been claimed as human space. In exchange for the safe departure of Admiral Crickstar's fleet, the Zephyrians agreed to share intelligence about other species' military capabilities and territorial claims. This information would help Earth avoid future conflicts with alien civilizations that might be tempted to test human defenses. The treaty also included provisions for ongoing diplomatic contact between Earth and the Zephyrian Empire, with regular meetings to prevent misunderstandings that might lead to future conflicts. Both governments recognized that their relationship would affect the balance of power throughout the sector. President Williams signed the treaty during a ceremony that was broadcast to every inhabited world within 50 light-years of Earth. The signing marked humanity's emergence as a recognized power in galactic politics, capable of defending its interests against much larger and more advanced civilizations. Commander Martinez analyzed the strategic implications of the treaty for Earth's military planning. The agreement with the Zephyrians would deter other potential aggressors, but it would also attract attention from alien governments that might want to test human defensive capabilities for themselves. Captain Thompson continued broadcasting from the Pathfinder, but his transmissions now focused on the diplomatic success rather than military intelligence. The message was clear to every species monitoring the situation. Humanity had successfully defended its territory through innovation rather than aggression. Lieutenant Amy Foster compiled the final intelligence reports from the Battle of Kepler 442 for distribution to human military academies and research institutions. The engagement had generated enormous amounts of data about alien military capabilities and the effectiveness of unconventional defensive strategies. Dr. Ross returned to her laboratory in Colorado to begin developing the next generation of defensive systems based on lessons learned during the battle. The success against the Zephyrians had proved that human creative thinking could overcome superior alien technology, but future threats would require continued innovation. Admiral Carter issued new orders to all human military forces based on the tactical lessons from the Kepler 442 engagement. Every ship and installation in human space would be equipped with improved versions of the systems that had defeated Admiral Krickstar's fleet. The Admiral's final report to Earth Command became required reading at military academies throughout human space. "We didn't win because we were stronger," Carter wrote. "We won because we understood something our enemies didn't. The line we drew in the stars wasn't just a boundary, it was a promise. And humans always keep their promises, even when keeping them requires more creativity than firepower." Captain Morrison resumed his patrol duties aboard the Defender, but now his ship was escorted by vessels from 17 different alien species that had requested formal diplomatic relations with Earth. The Battle of Kepler 442 had demonstrated that humanity could be a valuable ally or a dangerous enemy. The automated boundary beacons continued broadcasting their simple message throughout human space, but now every spacefaring species in the galaxy understood the true meaning of those words: human territory, peaceful passage permitted with prior authorization. Unauthorized military incursions will be met with appropriate response. Admiral Krickstar departed human space with his damaged fleet, but he left behind a detailed report for the Imperial Senate about humanity's defensive capabilities. The report recommended that the Zephyrian Empire avoid future conflicts with Earth and consider humans as potential allies rather than conquest targets. Within 6 months of the treaty signing, 43 different alien governments had established formal diplomatic relations with Earth. Most were not seeking military alliances or technology exchanges, but wanted to understand how a relatively young species had managed to establish absolute territorial sovereignty through strategic innovation rather than overwhelming force. The galaxy had learned that when humans draw a line in the stars, that line becomes as real and solid as any physical barrier, not because humans have the biggest ships or the strongest weapons, but because they have something far more dangerous: the creativity to make crossing their boundaries cost more than anyone is willing to pay. Commander Davis was promoted to ambassador and established Earth's first embassy on a neutral world near the Galactic Center. His mission was to represent human interests in the complex web of interstellar politics that governed relationships between dozens of different species. Dr. Ross received funding to expand her research program and share selected defensive technologies with allied alien governments that faced threats from aggressive empires like the Zephyrians. The goal was to create a network of species capable of defending themselves against conquest-oriented civilizations.